Alright, so what I'm doing here is I am retrofitting the fuel pump on a 91 Camaro Z28. So the problem with these Camaros is to get to the fuel pump, typically you would have to drop the rear axle, pretty much, disengage all of the suspension, remove the exhaust, and then drop the gas tank so that you can get to the fuel pump. Because obviously, as you can see, it's not in the best location. So car manufacturers didn't start putting in the fuel pump access doors until I don't know, late 90s. It's pretty much standard in all of them now. So what I did is I carefully measured out and cut an access panel. You don't want it any bigger than you have to be able to get the fuel sending unit out. The fuel sending unit is this part with all of the steel lines, and then the fuel pump is basically inside of it. So what I did is I just took a brake line cutter, a steel cutter. It has the little twist clamp that rocks back and forth, and it's not very fun. You got to get a screwdriver or a hammer or something under here and kind of separate your lines. And I recommend starting with that one and get it in a position where it's rotated up like that so that you can cut it. And then you can do the next one and the next one and the next one. And then what I did is I took, these are on the two outsides are 5/16 fuel line. So I just did I cut 3/8 out of the line to give us a little bit of room in between these two. Once I had cut them all, then I cut the ends off. So that gives us a little spacing to get the rubber lines, and it's less likely to have problems because it gives you a little bit of flexibility. So then I put these 2-inch fuel hoses in here and used fuel injection hose clamps to get those tightened down. Because the problem is that obviously this is inside the car, right? Inside the cabin. So once everything is sealed up, if we have any leaks at all, you're going to get those fumes back into the car. And those fumes attach to every piece of fabric inside the car. And it's pretty hard to get that gas stink out. So keep the doors open, keep the hatchback up so that you ventilate well and you won't have that problem. So obviously I'm a bit into this. I've already changed out that part, and what I'm doing now is retrofitting the panel. So for retrofitting the panel, I just got a decent gauge steel for residential HVAC for heating and air conditioning. Cut it out just a little bit bigger. You notice when I cut this, I left a little bit of a lip here, and you'll see why. And then I cut the steel piece so that it will lip just over this. And once I've got this piece in place, I'm going to put a couple of screws in the front section and in the back, but not on the side rails per se. I might put one on each side. We'll see. But yeah, so. And you want to use a rounded head screw when you do this, not your usual sheet metal screw, which are like hex heads, because that wears through your carpet pad that covers this back deck. And you want to make this as seamless as possible so that you don't see anything when you're done. So I'll show you my trick for getting a good seal here, because if we just screw this or we leave it as it is, as soon as you fire up this car, that's the sound that you're going to end up with, is this constant rattle. So that's going to be the next step here. So what we're going to do is we're basically going to create our own gasket, and I'm going to use a clear RTV silicone. You could use black RTV gasket maker. You could even use, residential silicone caulk if you happen to have some. That would be way too much caulk for this job. But yeah, let me get into it and I'll show you what I'm gonna do. Okay, so I'm just making a nice even bead all the way around this. And you can see I cut myself on that sheet metal earlier. So silicone and blood don't really mix. And try and wipe down this area before you do this, because we're looking for a permanent gasket, but we want to be able to remove this door, and that's going to be where my trick comes in. Because if we need to get back into this, we don't want to have to try and pry up a bunch of silicone. When I was cutting the access panel for this, I just used an air-powered cutoff tool with a 3-inch cutting wheel. Took me about a half an hour to get through this. Well, this is a lot easier to squeeze and do two-handed, I'll tell you. I like to go a little bit fat on the corners. Just to make sure. Alright, you ready for my trick? How do we get a panel on top of wet silicone and be able to get it back off easily, right? We still need to keep that good seal. Plastic wrap. What we're gonna do is we're gonna lay down a sheet of plastic wrap. I'll usually go over it this direction, then turn it back and go over the other direction. And then I'll set my panel on top of it, but not screw it down. The reason why is we want this to get a little bit tacky. We want it to set up a little bit before we put any kind of pressure on it, because as soon as we screw that down, it's gonna squeeze all of that out, and then there goes, you know, our gasket surface. So we want to put a little bit of pressure on it, but not squeeze everything out of it. Alright, I got smart and started using the handle of my tin snips as a phone stand. I'd show you, but that would defeat the purpose of having my phone in the stand. So I'm going to get a nice long piece of plastic wrap here. Ideally, you do this with a little bit less of a breeze than I have. Makes it a little bit easier to throw this down. I'm going to try and keep the plastic wrap separated, obviously, because that's going to make your life easier. Alright, now we got a nice sealable surface here. And I can come back through and I can trim this down. You can cut the middle out of it now, so that you just end up with a little bit of, you know, your gasket around the edge. And you want to be careful how far this comes forward, because you don't want this edge to cut your carpet. Don't worry, that's not a tornado, it's just our lunch whistle here in town. Alright. I gave that just a little bit of pressure so that it gives me a nice flattened bead all the way around. Looks pretty good. Alright, so now we're just going to leave that to set up, and when it's done we can stick our panel on there and set a couple of screws to help hold it in place, and we've got a retrofitted panel that should be fairly sealed and no vibration.